Focus on yourself. Force yourself to act and change your life. Stoic wisdom. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to navigate life with unshakable calm, while you feel constantly at the mercy of circumstances? Why some individuals manage to turn adversity into opportunity, while others remain trapped in endless cycles of frustration and despair? The answer doesn't lie in some special gift or secret privilege. It lies in an ancient philosophy that shaped emperors, slaves who became philosophers, and ordinary people who achieved the extraordinary. Today, you will discover the secrets of Stoicism that can literally revolutionize your existence. But be prepared. What you are about to learn may challenge everything you believe about success, happiness, and personal fulfillment. The hidden power of control. Imagine for a moment that you are driving down a highway and suddenly it starts to rain heavily. You have two options: spend your mental energy cursing the rain, questioning why this had to happen right now, letting anger and frustration take over, or simply accept that the rain is beyond your control. Turn on your wipers, slow down, and focus on what you can do. Drive safely. This simple analogy encapsulates one of the most powerful principles of Stoicism, a principle that, when truly understood and applied, has the power to completely transform your life. The ancient Stoics discovered something revolutionary over 2,000 years ago, something that modern psychology has only recently begun to validate scientifically. The fundamental distinction between what is within our control and what is not is the master key to a life of peace, purpose, and personal power. Epictetus, who spent the first part of his life as a slave and the second as one of Rome's most influential philosophers, taught that there are only two categories of things in the universe: those that depend on us and those that don't. Sounds simple, doesn't it? But the depth of this truth is oceanic. Think about how many hours of your day you waste worrying about things that are completely beyond your control. The behavior of others, government decisions, the global economy, the weather, the past that is gone, the uncertain future that has not yet arrived. Now imagine redirecting all that mental energy, all that life force you dissipate on useless worries, toward the only things that truly matter and that you can control. Your thoughts, your choices, your actions, your reactions, your character, your values, your effort, your discipline. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who ruled Rome at the height of its power, wrote in his personal meditations, never intended for publication, a truth that resonates through the centuries. You have power over your mind, not over external events. Realize this and you will find strength. This man, who wielded the power of life and death over millions, who commanded the most powerful legions in the known world, found his true strength not in his external power, but in his inner mastery. If this isn't a powerful lesson about where true power lies, what is? Modern neuroscience confirms what the Stoics intuited. Our brain possesses a capacity called neuroplasticity, the ability to reorganize itself and form new neural connections throughout life. This means you can literally reprogram your mind, reformat your thought patterns, and rebuild your emotional responses. But here's the secret few understand. This transformation only happens when you focus your energy on what you can control. Every time you waste mental energy trying to control the uncontrollable, you are literally weakening your capacity for real change. The mental trap that traps you. There is an invisible prison in which most people live, and the tragic thing is that they themselves built the bars and threw away the key. This prison is made of unrealistic expectations, constant comparisons, and the relentless pursuit of external validation. You know this prison intimately, even if you never realized you were trapped. It's that voice in your head that tells you you're not good enough when you see other people's success on social media. It's that feeling of emptiness after achieving something you thought would bring lasting happiness. It's the constant anxiety about the future and the lingering regret about the past. The Stoics had a term for this: perturbation. They understood that it's not the events themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about those events. When someone insults you, it's not the words that hurt, but your interpretation of those words, the meaning you attribute to them, the power you grant them over your emotional state. This is a crucial observation that most people never make, and that is precisely why they remain slaves to their circumstances. Seneca, the advisor to emperors and one of the richest men in Rome, regularly practiced what he called voluntary poverty. For a few days each month he slept on the floor, ate only bread and water, and wore his simplest clothes. Why? It wasn't masochism or eccentricity. It was a powerful mental exercise to break the trap of fear. By voluntarily experiencing what he feared most, the loss of his wealth and comfort, he discovered that even that was bearable. Fear lost its power over him. Now, think about your own fears. The fear of failure that paralyzes you. The fear of rejection that prevents you from pursuing your dreams. The fear of judgment that keeps you small and invisible. All these fears are mental constructs, stories you tell yourself about futures that may never come to pass. The Stoics teach us the technique of premeditatio malorum, negative visualization, not to become pessimists, but to free ourselves from the paralyzing power of fear. Imagine the worst-case scenario, really visualize it in detail. You lose your job, your relationship ends, you fail publicly. Now, instead of running away from these visualizations, explore them. What would you do? How would you survive? What lessons would you learn? What strength would you discover within yourself? When you do this honestly, something magical happens. You realize that even the worst-case scenario is survivable, and often it's the catalyst for something better. The most insidious mental trap, however, is the illusion that happiness always lies in the next goal, the next achievement, the next purchase. The Stoics called this hedonic adaptation, our tendency to quickly return to a baseline level of happiness, regardless of positive or negative events. You get that raise you've been wanting, and for a few weeks you feel on top of the world. Then it becomes the new normal. You buy your dream car, and the thrill lasts until you see a better model. This endless quest for more is a treadmill that never leads anywhere. Why you sabotage your own success? There's a brutal truth that needs to be confronted. You are your own worst enemy. It's not circumstances, it's not other people, it's not the economy or politics. It's you. More specifically, it's the self-sabotaging patterns you've developed over the years, often without realizing it. These patterns are like mental viruses, malicious programs running in the background, corrupting your efforts and undermining your progress. And most disturbingly, you feed them daily with your thoughts and behaviors. Procrastination is perhaps the most common form of self-sabotage, and the Stoics had profound insights into this. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "At the beginning of the day, say to yourself, 'Today I will encounter interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness.'" This isn't pessimism, it's mental preparation. When you expect challenges, they don't catch you off guard. When you anticipate obstacles, you can plan how to overcome them. Procrastination, at its core, is fear disguised as perfectionism. You put things off because you're afraid you won't do it perfectly. But the Stoics remind us that imperfect action trumps perfect inaction every time. Another devastating pattern of self-sabotage is negative self-talk. That voice in your head that constantly criticizes, belittles, and discourages you. You're not smart enough. You don't deserve success. Who do you think you are? This voice is not your friend, not your conscience, not the voice of reason. It's the echo of ancient fears, unresolved traumas, and limiting beliefs that were planted in you before you even had the critical capacity to question them. The Stoics practiced what we would now call cognitive restructuring. They constantly questioned their thoughts. Is this true? Is it useful? Is it within my control? The need for approval is another subtle but powerful form of self-sabotage. When you base your decisions on what others will think, you give away your power. You become a slave to the opinions of others, a puppet dancing to the expectations of an audience that, frankly, is too busy with its own problems to really care about you. Epictetus was brutal about this. If someone were to hand over your body to any stranger you met, you would be indignant. But you hand over your mind to anyone who comes along, to be disturbed and confused if they insult you. Are you not ashamed of this? Paralyzing perfectionism is another silent killer of dreams. How many projects have you never started because you didn't have all the perfect conditions? How many opportunities have you let slip by waiting for the ideal moment? The Stoics had a concept called prohairesis, the faculty of moral choice. They understood that perfection lies not in the outcome, but in intention and effort. You can't control whether your business will be successful, but you can control whether you give your best effort. You can't guarantee your relationship will last forever, but you can choose to be the best partner you can be today. Constant comparison is pure poison for the soul. In the age of social media, it has become an epidemic. You compare your backstage to the stage of others, your reality to the curated fantasy others present. The Stoics remind us that each person has their own journey, their own challenges, their own invisible battles. Comparing yourself to others is like comparing different chapters of different books. It makes no sense and only creates unnecessary suffering. The secret method of emperors, Marcus Aurelius, woke before dawn, not because he had to. He was the emperor. He could wake whenever he wanted, but because he understood something fundamental about human nature and the power of morning rituals. He began each day with what the Stoics called spiritual exercises, mental practices designed to strengthen character and clear the mind. These weren't religious rituals in the traditional sense, but sophisticated psychological techniques that modern neuroscience now validates as extremely effective for mental well-being and cognitive performance. The first exercise was contemplation of mortality, memento mori. Before you think this is morbid or depressing, understand the genius behind this practice. When you truly internalize that your time is limited, that each day could be your last, something extraordinary happens. The trivialities that normally consume your mental energy suddenly seem absurdly insignificant. That argument in traffic, irrelevant. That rude comment on social media, unimportant. When you embrace your mortality, paradoxically, you become more alive, more present, more focused on what truly matters. The second exercise was visualizing the day ahead. Not a naive, positive visualization where everything works out, but a realistic mental preparation for the inevitable challenges. Marcus Aurelius literally mentally rehearsed how he would respond to difficult situations, how he would maintain his composure when confronted with incompetence, how he would remain fair when pressured to be corrupt, how he would choose compassion when anger would be easier. This mental preparation is what modern psychology calls implementation intentions, specific if-then plans that dramatically increase the likelihood of desired behavior. The third exercise, and perhaps the most powerful, was what the Stoics called the view from above. Imagine yourself rising above your body, seeing your house from above. Then your neighborhood, your city, your country, the continent, the planet, the solar system, the galaxy. This cosmic perspective instantly puts your problems into perspective. That deadline stressing you out? From space, it's invisible. That person who irritated you, a microscopic speck on a rock floating in the infinite void. This isn't to minimize the importance of life, but to give it proper proportion. The Stoic emperors also practiced what they called the discipline of desire. They deliberately exposed themselves to minor discomforts to build resilience. They took cold baths, fasted periodically, and occasionally slept on hard surfaces. Today, science confirms that these practices of hormesis, controlled stress that strengthens the body, have profound benefits for physical and mental health. When you voluntarily choose discomfort, You are training your mind not to be a slave, to comfort. But the Stoic emperor's best-kept secret was their practice of nightly reflection. Before bed, they reviewed the day, not to punish themselves for mistakes, but to learn from them. 3 questions guided this reflection. What did I do well today? What could I have done better? What did I learn? This simple practice, when done consistently, creates a powerful feedback loop for personal growth. You become your own coach, your own mentor, constantly refining and improving. How to transform pain into power. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. This distinction, central to Stoicism, is revolutionary in its simplicity and power. When you break your leg, the physical pain is real and inevitable. But suffering, the mental narrative of why me, this ruined my plans, my life is over, that is a choice. The Stoics developed specific techniques to transmute pain into power, adversity into advantage, obstacles into opportunities. The first technique is what they called the discipline of perception. When something bad happens, instead of immediately labeling it as negative, pause. Ask yourself, how could this be? Be good, not in a naive or denial way, but genuinely exploring possibilities. Lost your job? Maybe it's the push you needed to finally start that business. A relationship ended. Maybe it's the liberation you needed to find yourself. Serious illness? Maybe it's the wake-up call to value life and change destructive habits. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, lost everything in a shipwreck. His response? Now I can devote myself to philosophy without distractions. He transformed total loss into total freedom. Epictetus was lame, possibly due to torture as a slave. His response? To use his physical disability as a constant reminder that the body is temporary and fragile, but character is eternal and indestructible. These were not men in denial. They were masters of reframing experiences in empowering ways. The second technique is the obstacle as path. The Stoics understood that obstacles are not detours from the path. They are the path. Every challenge you face is an opportunity to develop virtues, patience in frustration, courage in fear, discipline in temptation, compassion in conflict. Without obstacles, there is no growth. Without resistance, there is no strength. Iron needs fire to become steel. You need challenges to become who you are destined to be. Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, embodied Stoic principles when he wrote about his experience in the concentration camps. He discovered that even when everything is taken from you, family, freedom, dignity, health, one thing remains: your ability to choose your attitude. This is the ultimate expression of Stoicism, finding meaning and maintaining dignity even in the most extreme circumstances. The third technique is amor fati, love of fate. Not just accepting what happens, but embracing it, loving it, being grateful for it. This sounds impossible when you are in the midst of pain, but consider this. Every difficult experience you have ever had has contributed to who you are today. Your scars are your stories. Your struggles are your strength. When you truly embrace this, you stop from being a victim of fate to becoming its collaborator. The fourth technique is emotional alchemy. The Stoics were not emotionless robots, as many mistakenly believe. They felt deeply, but they were not controlled by their feelings. When anger arose, they transformed it into determination. When fear appeared, they converted it into prudent caution. When sadness visited, they distilled it into compassion. Emotions are energy, and energy can be redirected. The golden rule nobody tells you. There is a rule, rarely discussed openly, that has silently governed the success of every extraordinary person throughout history. It's not about working hard, though that is important. It's not about being smart, though that helps. It's about something much more fundamental and powerful, the ability to act independently of motivation. The Stoics understood that waiting to feel like doing something before doing it is a recipe for a life of mediocrity and regret. Motivation is a fickle mistress. It appears when we don't need it and disappears when we need it most. If you base your actions on how you feel, you're at the mercy of chemical fluctuations in your brain, hormonal cycles, sleep quality, what you ate for breakfast. The Stoics developed what they called the discipline of action, the ability to do what needs to be done, regardless of how you feel about it. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private meditations on a particularly difficult morning, "Early in the morning, when you are reluctant to get up, keep this thought present. I am getting up to do the work of a human being. Why am I dissatisfied if I'm going to do the things I exist for and was brought into this world to do?" Realize he wasn't motivated that morning. The emperor of the known world didn't want to get out of bed, but he did anyway, because he understood something crucial. Discipline trumps motivation every single time. Modern neuroscience has discovered something fascinating. Action precedes motivation more often than motivation precedes action. When you start to act, even without feeling like it, your brain starts releasing dopamine, the neurotransmitter of motivation. That's why the hardest part of any task is getting started. Once in motion, psychological momentum takes over. The Stoics intuited this 2,000 years ago with their emphasis on praxis, practice action doing. Here's what no one tells you about success. Successful people aren't more motivated than you. They've just developed the habit of acting despite the lack of motivation. Professional writers write even when they're not inspired. Athletes train even when they'd rather stay in bed. Entrepreneurs work even when the initial enthusiasm is gone. This is the true difference between amateurs and professionals. Amateurs wait for inspiration. Professionals show up regardless. Seneca had a powerful practice. He set specific tasks for each day and completed them no matter what. They weren't always big or important tasks. Sometimes it was simply writing a letter, reading a certain number of pages, doing some physical exercise. The point wasn't the task itself, but building the mental muscle of disciplined action. Every time you do something you committed to, even when you don't want to, you are literally reprogramming your brain to be more disciplined. The invisible price of inaction. While society obsessively focuses on the risks of action, what if you fail? What if people laugh? What if you lose money? Almost no one talks about the devastating cost of inaction. This cost is invisible, insidious, and infinitely more destructive than any failure could be. The Stoics deeply understood this principle and developed an entire philosophy around the urgency of virtuous action. Consider this: every day you put off starting that project, launching that business, having that difficult conversation, making that necessary change, you're not just staying in the same place. You're actively backsliding. Why? Because as you hesitate, time passes, opportunities disappear, energy wanes, and most importantly, you're reinforcing neural pathways of procrastination and fear. Every day of inaction makes the next day of inaction more likely. Seneca wrote something profound about this. Every new day we postpone, life slips through our fingers. He wasn't being dramatic. He was pointing to a cruel mathematical truth. Time is the only truly non-renewable resource. Lost money can be recovered, broken relationships can be rebuilt, compromised health can be restored. But time, every second that passes is gone forever. The psychological cost of inaction is even more severe. Every time you know what you should do but don't do it, you are essentially betraying yourself. This self-betrayal accumulates like compound interest, creating what psychologists call a debt of integrity. You begin to lose self-respect. Your self-confidence erodes. You develop an identity as someone who doesn't keep commitments, not even to yourself. This erosion of self-respect is a slow poison that contaminates every area of your life. But here's the most tragic part. Regretting inaction is infinitely worse than regretting action. Studies of people on their deathbeds consistently show that they regret not what they did, But what they didn't do, the risks not taken, the words not spoken, the dreams not pursued, the love not expressed. The Stoics called this the tragedy of the unlived life, dying with your song still inside you. Marcus Aurelius had a powerful meditation on this. Do not act as if you will live 10,000 years. Death looms over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good. He understood that inaction is not safety, it is waste. It's not prudence, it's cowardice in disguise. Every moment of hesitation is a moment of life unlived. Turn fear into fueled fear is the most misunderstood and wasted emotion in the human experience. Most people view fear as the enemy, something to be eliminated, suppressed, or avoided at all costs. The Stoics had a radically different perspective. They saw fear as valuable information and potential energy waiting to be transformed. The key is not to eliminate fear, but to alchemize it into something useful. First, let's dispel a myth. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is action despite fear. The Stoics understood that feeling fear is natural, human, and often appropriate. Fear is an evolutionary alarm system designed to keep you alive. The problem arises when you let fear paralyze you instead of informing you. When the fire alarm rings, you don't just stand there and listen, you act. The same should be true of emotional fear. Cato the Younger, one of the most hardcore examples of applied Stoicism, deliberately placed himself in situations that frightened him. He spoke in public when it terrified him. He defended unpopular positions when he feared retaliation. He didn't do this out of masochism, but because he understood a fundamental truth. Unconfronted fear grows. Confronted fear shrinks. Every time you avoid something out of fear, you are feeding that fear, making it stronger. Every time you act, despite fear, you are starving it, weakening its power over you. The Stoic technique of premeditatio malorum, imagining the worst-case scenario, isn't about becoming a pessimist. It's about robbing fear of its power through familiarization. When you mentally rehearse the worst-case scenario, two things happen. First, you realize that even the worst-case scenario is survivable. Second, you can develop contingency plans, transforming vague fear into specific preparation. Fear of the unknown is always worse than fear of the known. Tim Ferriss, a modern entrepreneur and author influenced by Stoicism, developed an exercise called fear setting, based on Stoic principles. You list your fears in detail, define the worst-case scenario, identify ways to prevent those scenarios, plan how to recover if they happen, and list the benefits of trying versus the costs of not trying. This process transforms paralyzing fear into actionable analysis. Neuroscientists have discovered that fear and excitement are physiologically nearly identical. Racing heart, sweaty palms, rapid breathing. The only difference is cognitive interpretation. The Stoics practiced conscious reframing. I'm not afraid, I'm energized. I'm not anxious, I'm anticipating. I'm not nervous, I'm ready. This isn't denial. It's strategic reinterpretation of bodily signals, the lost art of saying no, in a culture that glorifies yes, being positive, being open to opportunities, saying yes to life. The Stoics remind us of the transformative power of no. Every yes you give is implicitly a no to something else. When you say yes to an unnecessary meeting, you're saying no to time with your family. When you say yes to a project that doesn't align with your values, you're saying no to projects that do. The art of saying no isn't about being negative, it's about being selective. Seneca, despite being one of the richest and most powerful men in Rome, was notorious for his ability to say no. No to social invitations that didn't add value. No to business opportunities that would compromise his principles. No to sycophants and parasites who wanted to exploit his position. He understood that attention is a finite resource, and every frivolous yes is a theft from his essential goals. The modern problem is even worse. We live in an attention economy where everyone and everything competes for your time and mental energy. Notifications, emails, messages, posts, stories, feeds, every ping is someone asking for a yes from your attention. The Stoics didn't have smartphones, but they had equivalents: endless social demands, political obligations, family expectations. They developed what they called the discipline of desire, the ability to want less, need less, and therefore be free to focus on the essential. Warren Buffett, a modern practitioner of Stoic principles, even if he doesn't identify as such, has a powerful strategy: the 5-25 list. You list your top 25 priorities, circle the top 5, and then actively avoid the other 20 at all costs. Why? Because those 20 are the most dangerous, important enough to distract, but not important enough to justify your primary focus. Saying no effectively requires what the Stoics called clarity of values. If you don't know what you value, you have no criteria for decision-making. You become reactive instead of proactive, responding to any demand that arises instead of deliberately choosing where to invest your energy. Marcus Aurelius began each day by reminding himself of his core values: justice, wisdom, courage, temperance. These weren't philosophical abstractions, they were practical filters for daily decisions. Guilt is the biggest obstacle to saying no effectively. You feel guilty for disappointing people, for not being useful, for not seizing opportunities. The Stoics had a powerful antidote, remembering that you are not responsible for other people's emotions, only for your own actions. If someone gets upset because you said no to an unreasonable request, that's their problem, not yours. Your responsibility is to live by your values, not by other people's expectations. The secret of immediate action. There's a moment, a brief instant between intention and action, where most dreams die. It's that moment when you think, I should exercise, but you keep scrolling on your phone. When you know you should work on your project, but you open Netflix instead. When you plan to have that difficult conversation, but find an excuse to postpone it. The Stoics identified this moment as the crucial point where fate is decided, and they developed specific techniques to master it. Epictetus taught that there is only one moment where you have real power: now. The past is gone, the future is not yet, only the present exists, and only in the present can you act. This isn't just abstract philosophy, it's a practical strategy for overcoming procrastination. When you think, I'll do it tomorrow, you're literally lying to yourself because you can't act tomorrow. You can only act today. The most powerful Stoic technique for immediate action is what they called it catalepsis, the moment of clear perception where you see what must be done. In this moment you have a choice: act immediately or allow clarity to dissipate into rationalization and excuses. The Stoics trained to recognize these moments and act instantly, before the mind created obstacles. Mel Robbins's 5-second rule, while not explicitly Stoic, perfectly captures this principle. When you have an impulse to act toward a goal, you have 5 seconds before your brain starts creating excuses. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, act. This countdown interrupts the thought patterns that lead to procrastination and activates the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for deliberate action. Marcus Aurelius had a morning practice that exemplifies this principle. As soon as he woke up, before his mind could create reasons to stay in bed, he literally jumped out. Not gradually, not after thinking about it, but immediately. This small act of morning discipline sets the tone for the entire day. If you can win the first battle of the day against procrastination, you build momentum to win the next. The Stoic concept of prososh, continuous attention, is crucial. Here, it's not just about acting once, but maintaining constant vigilance against the tendency to postpone. It's like a muscle that needs constant exercise. Every time you choose immediate action over procrastination, you strengthen that muscle. Every time you postpone, you weaken it. Why comfort is your enemy. We live in the most comfortable era in human history. Temperatures are controlled, food is abundant, entertainment is endless. Conveniences our ancestors would have considered magical. And yet, paradoxically, we also live in an era of record-breaking anxiety, epidemic depression, and a widespread sense of emptiness and purposelessness. The Stoics would have predicted this perfectly because they understood a fundamental truth. Excessive comfort weakens character and atrophies the soul. Seneca, one of the richest men in Rome, regularly slept on hard floors, took cold baths, and fasted, not because it was necessary. He had dozens of slaves and every imaginable luxury, but because he understood that constant comfort creates fragility. When you are accustomed only to comfort, any discomfort becomes unbearable. When you voluntarily choose discomfort, you build psychological and physical resilience. Modern science fully validates this ancient wisdom. The concept of hormesis, the idea that controlled stresses strengthen the organism, is now well established. Physical exercise literally damages your muscles, so they grow stronger. Intermittent fasting stresses your metabolic system in a way that improves its efficiency. Exposure to cold activates adaptive responses that improve immunity and metabolism. The Stoics intuited these principles 2 millennia before we had the science to prove them. But the danger of comfort goes beyond the physical. Mental comfort, always agreeing, avoiding conflict, staying in your confirmation bubble, atrophies your ability to think critically and defend principles. Emotional comfort, avoiding difficult feelings, numbing yourself with distractions, shying away from uncomfortable conversations, prevents emotional growth and authentic relationships. Spiritual comfort, never questioning beliefs, avoiding difficult existential questions, leads to a life of superficiality and meaninglessness. Cato the Younger took this to the extreme. He deliberately wore simple clothes when everyone else wore elaborate togas. He walked barefoot on rough ground. He drank water when others drank wine, not out of religious asceticism, but as a constant training in independence from external circumstances. When you can be comfortable in discomfort, you become truly free. The modern problem is that comfort has become the default goal. Work hard so you can relax. Save money so you can retire in comfort. Avoid risks to maintain security. But the Stoics remind us that a life focused on comfort is a life wasted. Growth happens on the edge of discomfort. Character is forged in the fires of adversity. Meaning is found in overcoming challenges, not in avoiding them. The truth about mental discipline. Discipline isn't about superhuman willpower or special genetics. It's about understanding how your mind works and using that knowledge strategically. The Stoics pioneered what we would now call metacognition, thinking about thinking. They developed sophisticated techniques for observing, understanding, and directing their mental processes, techniques that modern cognitive psychology is only just rediscovering. The first principle of Stoic mental discipline is the distinction between initial impressions and judgments. When something happens, your mind immediately creates an impression. This is bad, this is unfair, this is threatening. The Stoics taught us to pause before accepting these impressions as truth. They called this phantasia cataleptique, the ability to examine our impressions before nodding to them. It's the difference between I'm having the thought that this is terrible and this is terrible. Epictetus used a powerful metaphor. Your mind is like a citadel and you are the gatekeeper. Impressions, thoughts, and emotions are like visitors wanting to enter. Your job isn't to keep everyone from approaching. That's impossible. Your job is to decide who enters. You can't control which thoughts arise, but you can control which ones you entertain, which ones you feed, which ones you allow to take up residence. The second technique is what the Stoics called prosoche, continuous attention. It's not meditation in the sense of sitting in silence, but constant mental vigilance. Throughout the day, observing your thoughts without judgment, noticing patterns, identify triggers. It's like being a scientist studying your own mind. When you objectively observe your mental processes, you gain power over them. Marcus Aurelius practiced what he called decomposition, breaking complex experiences into their basic components. Feeling overwhelmed? Decompose. It's a physical sensation of tension, thoughts about the future, memories of past failures, fear of judgment. When you decompose experiences into parts, they lose their monolithic power. You can then address each component individually. Neuroplasticity confirms what the Stoics practiced. Your brain is constantly rewiring itself based on your thought patterns. Every time you practice reframing, questioning thoughts, or focusing attention, you are literally changing the physical structure of your brain. The Stoics didn't know the science, but they understood the principle. Repetition creates mental reality. The third aspect of mental discipline is what Seneca called premeditation of evils. Not just imagining bad things happening, but mentally rehearsing your virtuous response to them. If you lost everything, how would you maintain your dignity? If you were betrayed, how would you choose forgiveness over bitterness? This isn't pessimism, it's mental preparedness. When you've already decided how to respond to adversity, you're not caught off guard when it occurs. The power of conscious choice every moment of your life is a fork in the road. Right or left, act or wait, speak or remain silent, forgive or hold a grudge, grow or stagnate. Most people navigate these choices on autopilot, reacting based on habit, emotion, or circumstance. The Stoics developed a radically different approach. Conscious, deliberate choice based on principles, not impulses. Epictetus taught that the ability to choose, what he called prohairesis, is the only thing truly yours. Your body can be imprisoned, your property confiscated, your reputation destroyed, but your ability to choose how to respond remains inviolable. This is the ultimate source of human freedom. Viktor Frankl rediscovered this truth in the Nazi concentration camps. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. The problem is that most of us abdicate this power. We say, "He made me angry," as if anger were something externally imposed. The situation forced me, as if we had no choice. I had no option, when in fact we choose not to see options. The Stoics brutally remind us, you always have a choice. Even when all options are bad, you still choose which one to accept. The Stoic technique of the reserve clause is powerful here. When you say, "I will get this job," you are staking your happiness on something beyond your control. When you say, "I will do my best to get this job," and accept the outcome with equanimity, you retain power over your peace of mind. The reservation clause isn't about lowering expectations, it's about maintaining psychological sovereignty. Seneca practiced what he called prior choice, deciding in advance how to respond to common situations. If someone insulted him, he would choose not to be offended. If he lost money, he would choose to see it as a lesson. If he got sick, he would choose to focus on what he could still do. These weren't reactions, they were premeditated choices. When the situation arose, the decision was already made. Modern psychology has discovered that decision fatigue is real. Making too many choices depletes mental resources. The Stoics anticipated this with their emphasis on principles. When you have clear principles, many choices become automatic. You don't have to decide whether to lie in every situation. You already have. You've decided to be honest. You don't need to decide whether to help someone in need. You've already decided to be compassionate. principles eliminate the need for thousands of micro-decisions, break the invisible chains you're trapped, but the chains are so familiar you don't even notice them anymore. Chains of social expectations, past conditioning, limiting beliefs, outdated identities. The Stoics were masters at identifying and breaking these invisible chains. They understood that true freedom isn't doing what you want, but wanting what you choose to want, free from compulsions and conditioning. The first chain is the opinions of others. You modify your behavior, censor your thoughts, and diminish your dreams based on what they might think. But who are they? Ghosts in your mind? Projections of your fears, people who are probably too busy with their own insecurities to truly care about you. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "How much trouble you save yourself if you care not what your neighbor says, does, or thinks, but only what you do yourself." The second current is your past. Traumas, failures, and humiliations that you carry as if they were still happening. The Stoics didn't minimize the reality of trauma, but they refused to be defined by it. Epictetus, who suffered horrific abuse as a slave, taught that the past exists only as memory, and memory exists only in the present. You can't change what happened, but you can change the meaning you attribute to it. The third current is the comfort zone. Not just physical comfort, but mental and emotional comfort, familiar thought patterns even when destructive, familiar relationships even when toxic, familiar habits even when sabotaging, the familiar feeling of safety even when it's slowly killing you. The Stoics deliberately practice stepping out of their comfort zone, not out of masochism, but to prove to themselves that they could. The fourth current is the fixed identity. I am just like this. I'm not the kind of person who I've always been. These statements are self-fulfilling prophecies. The Stoics understood that identity is fluid, character is constructed, personality is largely a matter of choice. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have the power to strip away many superfluidities that disturb you and that exist entirely in your judgment." The fifth current, and perhaps the most insidious, is the need for certainty. You want guarantees before acting. You want to know it will work before you try. You want to foresee the future before committing to the present. The Stoics embraced uncertainty as the fundamental nature of existence. Seneca wrote, "Every condition can change, and what happens to anyone can happen to all." Instead of paralysis by uncertainty, they found freedom in it. The alchemy of failure is the most brutal and effective teacher there is, but most people are too busy running from it to learn its lessons. The Stoics had a radically different relationship with failure. They didn't just accept it, they embraced it. They actively sought it out, understanding that every failure is a distillation of wisdom, an opportunity to strengthen character, a necessary step on the path to excellence. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, literally created the entire philosophy. After a catastrophic failure, he was a wealthy merchant when a shipwreck destroyed his entire fortune. Instead of despair, he saw opportunity. "Now I can devote myself to philosophy," he said. Failure was not a detour from his destiny, it was the catalyst for it. Without that shipwreck, Stoicism as we know it would not exist. Cato the Younger deliberately placed himself in situations where failure was likely. He ran in elections he knew he would lose. He championed unpopular causes. Why? Because each failure made him more resilient, less attached to results, more focused on principles than success. He understood that the fear of failure is more limiting than failure itself. The Stoic technique of negative inversion is powerful for transforming failure into wisdom. Instead of asking, "What went wrong?" ask, "What made this possible?" Instead of "Why me?" ask, "What can I learn?" Instead of "How do I get back what I lost?" and ask, "Who can I become through this?" This isn't toxic positivity, it's psychological alchemy, turning lead into gold. Thomas Edison, though not explicitly a Stoic, embodied this principle when he said of his thousands of failed attempts to create the light bulb, "I haven't failed. I found 10,000 ways that don't work." Each failure eliminated an incorrect possibility, bringing him closer to the solution. The Stoics saw all failures this way, not as endings, but as information. Seneca had a practice he called poverty rehearsal, periodically living as if I had lost everything. This served two purposes. First, it removed the fear of financial failure. Second, when small failures occurred, they seemed trivial in comparison. When you've willingly experienced your worst fear, minor failures lose their power to disturb you. Most importantly, the Stoics distinguished between failure of outcome and failure of character. You can fail to get the job, but succeed in giving your best. You can fail to save the relationship, but succeed in acting with integrity. You can fail to achieve the goal, but succeed in growing in the process. When you focus on what you control, your effort, your attitude, your choices, failure becomes impossible in the only realm that truly matters. Master your morning, master your life. The first hours of the day are the battlefield where your fate is decided. That's no exaggeration. How you wake up, what you do first, how you prepare your mind for the day, these seemingly small choices compound into massive results over time. The Stoics understood this deeply and developed specific morning rituals designed to establish mental mastery from the first moment of consciousness. Marcus Aurelius, ruling the world's greatest empire, woke before dawn. Not because he had to. He had secretaries, assistants, people to do everything for him. He woke early because he understood that the early hours are when your mind is clearest, your will strongest, your focus sharpest. Wasting those hours on extra sleep is like using your best wine for cooking. The first act of the day establishes psychological momentum. If you start by checking your phone, you're starting in reactive mode, responding to other people's agendas. If you start by snoozing, you're starting with procrastination, training your brain that your commitments are negotiable. The Stoics began with what they called morning prososh, a moment of focused attention where they set intention for the day. Marcus Aurelius's practice was writing, not for publication, but for clarification. He wrote reminders to himself about how he wanted to live that day, reminders about virtue, about mortality, about what truly matters. These weren't empty positive affirmations, but serious mental preparation for the challenges ahead. Like an athlete warming up before a competition, he was preparing his mind for performance. Seneca had a different but equally powerful practice, morning negative visualization. He imagined losing everything, wealth, status, health, not to start the day depressed, but to begin grateful and detached. When you mentally accept the possibility of loss, you stop wasting energy fearing it. You can then focus on what you have. While you have it, modern science validates these ancient practices. Cortisol, the stress hormone, is naturally highest in the morning. This can be channeled into unproductive anxiety or productive focus, depending on how you direct your attention. Studies show that people who have consistent morning routines have lower stress, better mental health, and greater productivity. But here's the crucial insight most miss. The morning really begins the night before. The Stoics practiced what they called nightly examination, reviewing the day, learning from mistakes, preparing for tomorrow. When you go to sleep with clarity about the day ahead, you wake up with purpose instead of confusion. Morning isn't about elaborate 2-hour rituals you saw in some productivity guru video. It's about simple consistency, waking up at the same time, making the bed, physical movement, a few minutes of reflection, simple actions that signal to your brain, I am in control, I am awake, I am ready. The end of the comparison. Game comparison. is the thief of joy, but in our age of social media, it's also the thief of sanity, self-esteem, and authenticity. You compare your reality to someone else's curated fantasy, your chapter 3 to someone else's chapter 20, your backstage to their highlight reel. The Stoics would have seen our modern obsession with comparison as a form of willful insanity. Epictetus was particularly brutal about this. If you want to improve, be content to appear ignorant or foolish in external matters. He understood that the need to appear superior or even equal is a prison. When you are constantly measuring yourself against others, you are never present in your own life. You are always somewhere else, being someone else, living an imaginary life of comparison. The truth no one wants to admit: comparison is a form of emotional procrastination. It's easier to envy the success of others than to create your own. It's more comfortable to criticize the choices of others than to make your own difficult choices. It's better to judge from the outside than to enter the arena. The Stoics called this false occupation, being busy with the lives of others to avoid dealing with your own. Marcus Aurelius, who had every reason to compare himself favorably with others, he was literally the most powerful man in the world, wrote, "Do not waste the rest of your life in thoughts of others, unless you are doing so for some mutual benefit." He understood that every moment spent comparing is a moment not spent growing. The Stoic solution is not to pretend others don't exist, or that their achievements don't matter. It's to understand that each person is playing a different game with different rules, different resources, and different goals. Comparing yourself to others is like a chess player envying a poker player for having more chips. It makes no sense because you're not playing the same game. Seneca practiced what he called competition with yourself. The only person you should compare yourself to is who you were yesterday. Are you wiser, more disciplined, more compassionate, more courageous? These are the only metrics that matter. Everything else is noise. Liberation comes when you realize there is no them to impress. They are busy trying to impress their own them. It's an endless cycle of people trying to impress people who are trying to impress other people. The Stoics break this cycle by focusing on internal virtue rather than external validation. The silent revolution. Within, while the world seeks external revolutions, political, technological, social, the Stoics understood that the only revolution that truly matters happens silently within you. It is the revolution of taking full responsibility for your life, of stopping blaming circumstances, of ceasing the role of victim, of becoming the author of your own story. This revolution makes no noise, it attracts no attention, but it changes absolutely everything. This revolution begins with a brutal realization. You are exactly where your choices have led you. Not your circumstances, not your luck, not the actions of others, your choices. Even when terrible things happen to you through no fault of your own, your response is your choice. This is the ultimate responsibility and the ultimate freedom. Epictetus, who spent half his life as a slave, understood this better than anyone. He didn't choose to be a slave, but he chose how to respond to slavery. He used this time to study philosophy, develop his character, and prepare himself for when freedom came. When he was finally freed, he had already been internally free for years. External freedom only matched his internal freedom. The silent revolution requires what the Stoics called the discipline of assent, the practice of questioning every thought, every belief, every assumption. Is this true? Is it useful? Is it within my control? Most of our suffering comes from automatically assenting to thoughts we never question. I'm not good enough. It's too late. I don't deserve success. These aren't facts. They're opinions. You've accepted as facts. This revolution is silent because it requires no announcement. You don't need to post about it, talk about it, or seek validation for it. In fact, seeking external validation for your internal transformation is contradictory. True change happens silently, consistently, day after day, choice after choice. Seneca wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." Inner revolution requires letting go of the old you, your excuses, your victim stories, your self-imposed limitations. This can be painful. That's why most people prefer external revolution. It's easier to try to change the world than to change yourself. Conclusion: your choice defines your destiny. We've reached the moment of truth. You've read about principles that emperors used to rule empires and slaves used to find freedom. You've learned techniques that can literally rewire your brain and transform your reality. You've been exposed to wisdom that has survived 2,000 years because it works, always has, and always will. But none of this matters unless you do the only thing that truly counts: choose to act. Knowledge without action is just intellectual. Entertainment. You can read every philosophy book in the world, watch every motivational video, attend every seminar, but if you don't take action, you're just sophisticated procrastination. The Stoics had a term for people who knew philosophy but didn't live it: hypocrites. Harsh, yes. True, absolutely. This moment, right now, as you read these words, is a turning point. You can shut down this content and return to your old life, your old patterns, your old excuses. Or you can do something different. You can choose a practice, just one, and start today. Not tomorrow, not Monday, not New Year's. Today. Now. Maybe it's waking up 30 minutes earlier and using that time for reflection instead of scrolling. Maybe it's practicing the dichotomy of control, taking a current concern and consciously releasing what's not under your control. Maybe it's saying no to a commitment that doesn't align with your values. Maybe it's having that difficult conversation you've been putting off. Small doesn't matter. Starting matters. The Stoics believed in something called cosmic sympathy, the idea that all things are interconnected, that your actions ripple through the universe in ways you can't imagine. When you choose to live with virtue, discipline, and wisdom, you're not just changing your life, you're raising the collective consciousness, you're becoming an example of what's possible. You're lighting a path for others to follow, but don't do it for others. Do it for yourself. Because at the end of your life, you won't regret the risks you took, the challenges you faced, the fears you confronted. You will regret the chances not taken, the dreams not pursued, the life not lived. The Stoics constantly remind us, memento mori, remember that you will die. This isn't morbid, it's liberating. When you truly understand that your time is limited, you stop wasting it. The choice is yours and always has been. You can remain a victim of circumstances, or you can become the master of your responses. You can continue hoping for better, or you can improve your approach to life. You can continue wishing to be different, or you can start acting differently. The Stoics don't promise it will be easy. They promise it will be worth it. If this content resonated with you, if you felt something shift within you while reading, don't let that feeling die. Subscribe to the channel to continue receiving transformative wisdom. Leave a like as a commitment to yourself that you will take action. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. But most importantly, close this video and do something. 1. Action. 1 small step. 1 act of courage, because in the end, all Stoic wisdom comes down to this: you have power over your choices. Use it. Your life depends on it. Your future demands it. And your future self will thank you for it. The revolution begins now. The choice is yours. The moment is now. Choose wisely, choose courageously, choose now.